important who understand how important it is to have proper cyber measures and just proper security involving your systems. So one problem that we had seen while we were reviewing the case study was that I believe there was a quote directly from the study that it said that kind of brushed off cybersecurity, right? And just off the bat, that's kind of a red flag because we all know how important it is to have secure systems, and it was kind of like a domino effect with that mentality that led to the DDoS attacks that came later on.
And I
Also,
want
adding
to,
on,
oh, sorry, Edward. I was just going to touch on the quote he was referring to. Jazz Mod, the head of the IT manager, did not see Popvo as an IT company. And he also said that a system can't be 100% secure. And while those facts are true, that's not the mentality to have, nor the mentality you want your team to have. You should always strive for 100% security, even if it's not completely possible. Go ahead, Idris, sorry.
yeah, of course. I just wanted to add on. So even though, because it wasn't taken too seriously, a lot of the voters' personal information was at risk. And I think that's a really, really serious consequence because of this attack. It wasn't taken seriously because it was just a voting system, but I think they didn't realize that there were millions and millions of users that and the attack put them at risk. So that is also a big component of the attack and a big consequence.
Yeah, to basically wrap up my team members' things, they had technical things that went wrong and stuff that could have been avoided just if they took it seriously. But overall, they should have adopted a when an attack happens mentality instead of an if an attack happens mentality. So a lot of things could have avoided if they took that mentality instead.
Okay, thank you. Great presentation, and congratulations with getting so far in the competition. Congratulations to be here today. My name is Alex Bazai. I'm Chief Information Security Officer for Align Communications, where MSP headquartered here in New York City. So I have a few questions for the team. I'd like to dig a little bit deeper. So we're dealing with two incidents. We're dealing with the incidents first in 2012 and 2014. How do you assess the quality of incident response in 2012 and 2014? Were they able to identify the problem in 2012? And if not, what was missing? What do you think? And how this process improved, if improved, in a later incident?
Yeah, I don't mind beginning. 2012, we see lack of leadership beginning with Jets, and we see that fall down between the members of the team overall. And we see in 2014, we see an IT advisory go into play. We see many different improvements, such as a change to the improvement of the programming language, which allowed an improvement in overall scalability of the entire networking system. They implemented more data security and safety measures, and they even changed providers, as previously their cloud provider failed under the heavy loads. And even though many of those issues were still found in the 2014 year, many improvements were found as well.
And before the 2012 attacks, there was an attack that happened in their practice rounds because they did test the system a few times before the actual voting on-site and off-site voting took place. And they didn't take it, again, they didn't take it as seriously, and then they just let it go and continued on without assessing the risks first and before actually taking action with them. So that's what caused the huge catastrophe in 2012. But as Carlos mentioned, in 2014, they did hire third-party service providers, so there's Cloudflare, Amazon Web Services to help them. So yeah, so it did help a lot in terms of damage. There was much less damage in 2014 because they did their due diligence and hired those third-party service providers.
Yeah, in addition to what Iker said, in 2012, they had no cyber response plan at all ready for this type of event. If they even had a plan in place, they could have knew what rules to follow, what process to follow. But obviously they didn't. So they were scrambling and rushing to fix things, but it was too late. In 2014, they definitely made an improvement on that and had a plan in place on what steps to take.
Yeah, just to add on to what Ikram and Veer were saying, regarding the third-party service providers, you could see that they improved in 2014 because they did hire 3 companies, as Ikram mentioned, Cloudflare, Amazon Web Services, um, and Udomain. And we could see that this really came in handy because when they were being attacked in 2014, we saw that both Udomain and Amazon Web Services pulled their services while they were being attacked. But while that happened, because they had Cloudflare, Cloudflare actually stepped up. They had their own other project they're working on that they assigned Popvote to. So having those 3 providers, having that extra provider, really provided them with the extra security in 2014 as opposed to in 2012.
Okay, thank you. So again, progressing to 2014 episode, so they are able to identify some problems, they implement some controls. However, then the 2014 incidents start progressing. One of the takeaway from the case study, the Provote team starts realizing they facing different set of problems. They try to address after specifically AWS and other company drop them. They start reaching different ISPs with help, and the services they're offering was not affordable for them. So they start seeing the constraints in resources. In a situation like that, what would you think? What would your approach be? How to prioritize? What would you address first when you have limited resources, budgetary, first of all?
In the industry, it's not unusual to not be able to implement everything, right? So if you had to select 1 or 2 things that you only have money to implement out of your set of recommendations, what would that be?
Sure. I just want, sorry, I was thinking about the other question that was asked as well, as if we had a limit of resources. So responding to that question first, I believe like in that situation, it's really like a kind of think on your feet type of environment, right? When you don't have enough money and you're already when you don't have enough resources and you're experiencing cyber attacks, and you don't have enough to protect you, you really have to learn how to prioritize. I think just the integrity of the system itself, and I think it's more crucial to be able to protect data because since we're talking about a voting system and people are sending their personal information in, I think it's more crucial to be able to protect that data because that's actual like consumer personal information of like everyone who's using the system, right? So in terms of priorities, I think it would be best, if you can't protect the whole system, figure out a way to secure the data itself in a kind of resource constrained environment. And going on to the second question, where you were asking about the what type of remediations we would suggest. There were a lot of remediations that we had throughout our presentation. I think one of the ones I would like to talk about that's I think super important was 2-factor authentication and how important that is to like, kind of any type of system nowadays, right? In the case study, they mentioned how some email accounts of some workers at Popvotes, they were hacked, right? They didn't really go too into depth into how these got hacked, but we can assume that if the employees were trained to like deal with phishing attacks, or if even 2-factor authentication was enabled, these hacks could have been avoided on their email accounts. And if those hacks had been avoided, who knows what would have happened? Because having worker email accounts hacked is always a huge consequence that could really be avoided with something as simple as 2-factor authentication.
Yeah, just adding on to what Abrar said, he mentioned training. So, we understand that like technical things such as anti-DDoS services, they can be expensive, right? But where can you focus the rest of your resources? Obviously, your staff. Abrar said amazingly, training. Training is basically everything. If your staff if they have the knowledge, cyber awareness is pretty much everything. So if they know where attacks are most likely to come from, they'll be more ready to take that on. The common paths, close those off as soon as possible. And from there, like he said, work on your feet if they take any other route.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts? If not, I have last question. I'd like to a little bit explore the roles of cloud provider. In the middle of 2014 episode, AWS dropped services for Provo team. Like, what do you think should be the role and responsibilities, or if any, of the cloud providers in situations like this?
That's a really good question. I believe most cloud providers, sorry, was someone saying something? No, okay. Most of their policies are that we're gonna handle the hardware for you. We'll you know, keep it up to date, keep it running, but security and stuff like that, that's all on you. That's not our business. So if their security protocols and stuff are weak and they end up being compromised, that is not the cloud provider's problem. That's it. So I believe that's pretty much their policy.
Yeah, unfortunately, like Manveer stated, cloud providers, they're more focused on providing you with a platform, but their security might be lacking in some areas. In this case, I feel like, you know, as a company, you really have to be prepared just for this to happen. Because as we saw, AWS and Domain, they both pulled their services as soon as the DDoS attacks got too much for them to handle. And thankfully, Cloudflare was there to provide some backup support to PopVote. But a remediation I would have for this, or a suggestion, there are specific cybersecurity based companies that like you could have contracts with and implement into your systems. Like for example, I think Akamai is one of them. And you know, understanding that cloud providers, their priority may not be security all the time. It's kind of important to understand that as a company and then kind of build around that instead of just assuming because we have a cloud provider, we're going to be good and we're going to have security.
And also building on what Abrar said, I think I agree with their dependence on the cloud service providers, because in 2012, because they had to deal with everything on their own and it didn't really have that kind of safety net to help them when the attacks happened, they kind of just expected in 2014, oh yeah, we're going to have these third-party service providers, we're going to have them come in and they'll take care of everything. And once everything started crashing down, they didn't know what to do. So I think that having that proper training and that understanding would really help, especially in a case where if your third-party service provider doesn't work.
So you think it's okay for the cloud provider to drop the service in the middle of the incident because they simply cannot handle the service, and it may affect other tenants or other clients of this provider?
No, personally, no, we don't think it's right, or we don't think that's like okay at all. But we do think that, you know, as a company, you would have to be prepared for whatever's going to happen. It is very unfair for, in my opinion, and in my team's opinion, it is unfair for cloud providers to just pull their services as soon as the attacks are getting too much to handle. But you know, as a company, you know, it's not fair. The cloud providers, they could breach they could fail to provide their continuity of their service, but you know, it's your responsibility to still be able to be prepared for that to happen. Which unfortunately, PopVote, they were kind of there, you know, because they did have 3 providers, and 2 of them did pull out, but thankfully because they had that 3rd provider, they still had security at the end. But you know, as a company, you have to be prepared for whenever this could happen. It's really all about how prepared the company is with their cybersecurity protocols.
Yeah,
Okay.
and just adding on to that, sorry. So in the context of where this case study took place, Hong Kong, there isn't really a cohesive cybersecurity legal framework or regulations that are actively enforced. So I think it would be in the best interest of the company to design their contracts with third-party providers to ensure that they don't pull out when things get heated.
Okay, thank you.
Look.
Hi, so maybe I go next and I start with congratulations on getting to this stage, and thank you for a great presentation. I'm following up from Alex because I work for a cloud provider. Alicia Cade, and I'm at Google CISO office. I have a kind of broader questions as well, which perhaps also we all have here the fantastic hindsight of recent years. A lot has happened since 2012. It's a twofold question. We've seen a lot of companies, of course, dealing with cyber incident, and some of them came through it unscathed in terms of public opinion. Actually, they have almost been recognized as companies with integrities and transparency. And some didn't do that well. And as you're mentioning in your presentation, the pub vote actually did struggle with the reputational impact after the press conference they held. What would be your advice to the companies to effectively handling the public opinion, the PR, to make sure that actually they can capitalize and come out of that in a fair view?
I'm so sorry. You're asking if what can they do to go on ahead or go off ahead from like the
how to handle PR and basic public opinion in the best possible way in the unfortunate event of cyber attack. What would be your general advice to companies how to make sure they handle it in the best possible way?
Yeah, of course, they must release a press statement first and foremost to the general public regarding the incident, and also with that, an apology to their users for the incident occurring. After that, it comes down to remediating the issues and making a promise to their consumers that the issue won't arise and they won't be affected ever again.
Yeah, that's really a great question. And just to add on to Carlos, to what he was saying, yes, they do have to issue a press statement immediately, as soon as possible, as soon as when they are being attacked, or as soon as they find out they've been attacked. And I think the key for companies and PR regarding cyber attack issues really is transparency. I think it lies a lot in transparency, and just being very, very straightforward and honest with your consumers. But not only that, just so you don't sugarcoat what's going on, right? Like a lot of companies do nowadays after they have a data breach, they try to sugarcoat it and try to make sure, like try to make it seem like everything will be okay, and they kind of hide a lot of things from the public. I think it's very important, one, to be transparent, let the consumers know that the company is very well aware of what happened, and let them know like, hey, everything that we know, you guys know too, right? So that's what I mean by transparency. And I think the second part that's super important to that is kind of emphasize what you're doing about the issue, right? Like, what are you doing to fix it? What are you doing to prevent it from happening again? And kind of making sure the company's values kind of align, like taking cybersecurity seriously, right? Be like, oh, we're taking your data seriously, we're taking protection seriously, and we're taking steps to make sure that an attack like this doesn't happen again.
And also adding on to what Bar is saying, usually when a company suffers from a data breach like that, usually they send us a cookie cutter statement like, hey, like, sorry about what happened, this is what happened, and this is what we're doing to prevent it. But usually it doesn't usually gain back the trust of the voters or of the consumers, of the customers. So I think after, what I suggest is after they release that press statement, right, I think that they should take the remediation suggestions into consideration and actually put in the work to actually make sure that this doesn't happen again. So what they could do is they could host another election and then prove to their customers that, hey, we actually followed through with our promise, followed through with our words, and actually improved on our systems. So I think that once they do that, it'll all gain back the trust of their consumers and their voters, so that it kind of makes them feel better knowing that their data is safe and the personal information is safe. And that also protects the integrity of the elections as well.
Yeah, and just adding on, my teammates have already said, I think it's also important for PopVote to take actions to support the customers that were affected, to provide services for recovery. And I know there's like McPhee in the United States. I don't know what the equivalent to that would be in Hong Kong, but providing theft protection services and also educating the public on how to protect themselves against phishing attacks and fraud that could possibly happen on online platforms.
All right, we have 6 minutes left, so let's move on to other judges, please.
I'll go. A quick question on how you guys manage to collaborate and kind of work as a team given the current context.
I can start off speaking on that. So given the nature of online learning, and we actually met online virtually, and that worked collaborating online for the e-board. So we kind of just continued working virtually for the case study. We had a centralized sort of folder of all of our work that we all had access to, so we could keep track of what others were doing and check up with each other if there was a certain part that needed clarity. And we also kept an active group chat in which we communicated in regularly.
And also adding on to Rosa, we're all also a part of the e-board, so we do know each other very well, and we do work with each other very well in terms of collaboration. When working as a team, we actually set up check-in meetings. So about every 2 weeks, we would check in with each other, and based on that, we would go over our progress of our work, and based on that, we give each other suggestions on how we can improve. And on top of that, we also met with our mentors Trevor and Mary, and they give us a lot of amazing feedback. And based on that, we also had additional meetings. We met a couple times in person, we met a couple times online. So we met as much as possible to make sure that all the information was transparent, and then we all knew what each group member was doing. So yeah, so we just took that approach. So we were just super transparent, super communicative. Even when preparing for this interview, we were preparing a lot. And then with also the presentation, we would give each other feedback once again, especially with the voiceovers and whatnot.
Cool, thank you.
Hi, I'm Radhika Bajpai. Just a quick question. Maybe if you would like to share, like, what are 1 or 2 things that you liked most about working on this case study and how it helped with your current coursework, if any?
I can start out with that question. So what I liked about this case study was that it was a little different from what we usually see. I've done case studies in the past, and it's usually with a bank, or there's somebody stealing like a lump sum of money, or it usually has to do with a financial services company. But this time it was more of like an online voting system, which I never thought. Usually when we think of a data breach, we would think like, for example, T-Mobile, or like a really, really big company in the United States, but we usually don't think about all those other incidents where it could happen, such as voting, especially in the political world. So that's what I really liked about this one. It kind of showed a different perspective on cybersecurity, and in ways that we never thought it could affect different sectors of the world, or different divisions, and different big political events, such as the one in Hong Kong. And also personally, I've started taking cybersecurity courses at my school, but this kind of gave me like a really good understanding, really good perspective on going into my cybersecurity courses next semester. So I kind of have that background, especially with DDoS attacks and third-party service providers. So that really gave me more information on it. And it was really, really interesting, and I actually enjoyed working on this case study.
Thank you.
I can also answer that question. So what I liked the most about this case study, well, it was the first one that I participated in. It is my first year. Not only getting involved in cybersecurity clubs and competitions, but also being at the college. So a lot of it was new to me, but I kind of liked the challenge. I liked that I had to do a lot of like inductive research, sort of like observing and then generalizing the information to then come to a conclusion or a theory based on what I was able to internalize from the documents. Just networking with my upperclassmen, that was a really cool opportunity. I'm flattered. Thank you for wanting to include me. And it has helped me in my current classes because I'm taking my prerequisites for the cybersecurity courses once I move up in my education in college. So I actually did a little research write-up about a data breach incident on T-Mobile for that class, and sort of the analytical frameworks and the questions to think about and address when writing about cybersecurity attacks helped me from what I experienced in the case study.
Sounds good. Barry, would you like to ask anything? I want to give you a chance.
It's getting close to that, but I just, if anyone has any additional thoughts on the legal, you had some great thoughts about the contractual provisions in the contracts between the pop vote and the cloud providers. If anyone has any thoughts about some of the interesting, unusual legal issues presented in this case, the international context, criminal, all that.
Yeah, I can sort of speak on the legal implications of this study. I did find it a bit odd that Hong Kong did not have a cohesive, centralized set of laws to address cybersecurity attacks. From what I was able to read, it's kind of like the general laws are applied to data breach incident, like theft. The theft ordinance can be applied for fraud and things of that nature, but there's no framework to address these type of incidents besides the personal data privacy ordinance, which still isn't actively enforced. It's more of like a suggestion. Like in the case of a data breach, it's suggested and encouraged that the company notifies their customers or their users of the incident, but it's not a requirement. So I think that in terms of building integrity and transparency with third-party providers and with their users, companies have to take it into their own hands to come up with internal regulations for the sake of their customers and the well-being of their company.
Would anybody like to add anything to this? Okay, all right, folks. Thank you so much for your time. Excellent performance today. I'm going to email you regarding the next steps, and thank you so much. I hope you will consider participating in this competition next year. Please tell your friends, and again, you know, we are all very impressed with your performance and how much you learned this semester. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank
Have
you
a
for
good day.
spending Sunday morning with us.
Yeah, thank you for taking
Have
the
a
time.
great day.
Have a great day.